All right. Now, economist Dawie Roodt has sparked a debate with his proposal to shut down most public universities in South Africa. He argues that government should be funding should actually instead be directed to private institutions, claiming that many state-run universities are underperforming and mismanaged. To unpack this controversial suggestion, we're joined by Dawie Roodt. But we also thought, to be fair, we'd get the University South Africa CEO also involved in this one, Dr. Petiwe Madudu, joining us as well for this conversation. Dawie, thank you so much for the time. Let's start off with you. Why don't you just set us straight here and set the record for us? What is it that you're actually suggesting and why you feel so?
Good morning to you. Thank you very much. I can just say that I hold 2 degrees from UNISA. I'm very proud of that. I've said many things about education, and let's rather call it skills development because that is a better phrase. We are too fixated on qualifications in South Africa and forget about the necessary skills. But of course, I think the whole skills development system or education system in South Africa needs to be changed. And we have to start with primary education. Our primary education is simply just not good enough. Our kids cannot read and write. We have to do something about that. When it comes to universities, and the most recent unemployment figures suggest that a large number of graduates in South Africa are actually unemployed. And I think part of the reason why they're unemployed is because we are not producing the right kind of skills when it comes to universities. The humanities, for example, let's be honest about these sort of things. Many degrees, like a political science degree, for example, I will not employ such a person because I don't have any need for such a person. But there is actually a scarcity of, for example, drone electricians or drone pilots or geneticists or people with artisan skills like that. There's a huge shortage of that. In the meantime, the private tertiary institutions, there are many of them, they're producing high quality education and they actually produce what the market needs. So what I suggest, and I'm not saying all the universities, but I suggest that many of our public universities should be converted into some colleges to produce skills that we really need in the economy. And we should also support the private sector tertiary education institutions because they're doing an excellent job. And there are many examples of that. Yeah. Of course, and let's be honest about this as well, and many of our public universities are simply badly run. And they are, unfortunately, UNISA is one of those examples. Just go back the last couple of years, the way that UNISA has been run, but many of the other ones as well. So the private sector in this instance, I think, can do a much better job quite often. Of course, the private doesn't mean that private sector is always right. There's always space for the state. I think that things like philosophy and those sort of things really belongs in the real good universities, and that should be accommodated in really good universities. But we have to shift the emphasis in South Africa and start producing the kind of skills that we really, really need. Everybody wants to go to university because it's good and it's fancy to have a degree, but we have to realize that is not necessarily what the economy requires. And in the meantime, we've got shortages of many of the other skills that I've mentioned already.
All right. Just for the sake of information, South Africa has 19 public universities, if I'm correct here. Dr. Madudu, you'll correct me here. 7 of those universities or 7 universities of technology, excuse me, that totals 26 state-owned institutions. The private sector has 126 registered private tertiary education institutions. Many of those are private universities then. Doctor, perhaps let me get your response to what you've just heard as a suggestion from economist Dawie Roodt.
Thank you very much for having me. I do think that the article that Dr. Roodt has written has caused a stir, not only because of how disjointed the whole reasoning is, but also because of his lack of understanding of what our higher education system looks like. So those 126 private higher education institutions are carrying about 20% of the registered student within higher education. The 80% is being carried by the public higher education institutions. And we've got about 24% of the participation rates in higher education. And by no means is that close to what is required for our high income countries and upper low income countries. So I do think that there needs to be a better understanding of the workforce which will lead to our country's development. The institutions that he's talking about, firstly, when it comes to accountability, they are accountable to their shareholders. And secondly, when it comes to infrastructure intense qualifications, they are nowhere to be found. We are not criticizing higher education institutions which are private. We need them in order to accommodate the huge number of talent and students which are emanating from the schooling sector. So the issue of either this or it becomes a problem. What I find very disturbing in his article is when he insinuates that the quality that we have within the public higher education is less than that that is offered within the private higher education. Go to the Council on Higher Education. They will tell that the challenges that we are experiencing when it comes to quality, in as much as they are they are both in private and in public higher education institutions. With the graduates, absorption only about 10% within a country whose economic growth is so limited, and we're experiencing high levels of unemployment to the tune of about 37% among the youth, whereas we're talking about unemployment levels of about 10% for the graduates. There is no doubt that there is a need. Yes.
Doctor, I'm so sorry. I'm going to just come in because we're just going to do it for the interest of time then. What do you think, however, about the right kind of skills and perhaps fixing that within universities as being a key proponent of the discussion? I think there's going to be a lot to be said about whether we should do away with public universities, because that is something else entirely. But the right kind of skill levels that are perhaps taught at these universities, is there something to be said about that?
So let me tell you, there's nothing new about that. We drafted a national plan on post-schooling education, which is pointing to the fact that we currently have an inverted pyramid when it comes to the skills that are being produced. We need more of your TVET college kind of skills and your practical kind of skills. And it was planned that we do need to increase there without necessarily shrinking the university education. So what he is saying is nothing new. It's there. That plan is more than 7 years old.
So, Dawie, why should education then be more private than public?
I just want to make a comment about this article that the doctor said I've written. I didn't write this article. It was written by a journalist, and a journalist quoted selectively from what I've said. So I just want to make that specific comment. Well, if you look at, there are many private institutions. Remember, the private institutions, private higher education institutions, they are driven by the profit motive, which means that they have to produce a product that somebody wants to buy. And more of these private institutions are doing an excellent job. And in many instances, and I know some of these, where their students get a job even before they qualify. So they are focused on to provide a necessary skill that is required in the market. I just want to make a comment about the quality of South Africa's education universities. Of course, we've got some world-class universities in South Africa. We still have. But we have to be honest that the quality of South Africa's universities in some instances deteriorated the last couple of years. And they are just not simply accepted or recognized internationally as they used to be. That is also a reality. And I think it's not only the university's fault here. It really starts at primary education. And that's what I started off this discussion by saying that the emphasis actually in South Africa shouldn't even be on universities. It should be on world-class primary education. Because if you look at the various studies, so the quality of our primary education really is just not good enough. And in the process, we give students to the universities that are not prepared to really to go to university. And that puts huge pressure on the university universities as well. So the whole skills development system or education system in South Africa needs to be overhauled.
Yeah, you did say as well, and I know this is a selective quote, but according to that article, it says that you said only approximately 10% of the population should attend university, and it's crucial that these institutions produce high-quality graduates.
Yes.
Why only 10%, do you feel? Why not the rest? And why then don't private institutions then invest in public institutions to make them better, and holistically the whole country then would benefit?
Okay, where I got to this 10% is I simply looked at many countries in the world. If you look at advanced, rich countries in the world, their figures around about 15% or sometimes a little bit higher. There's also a lot of research going on at the moment that in certain instances, everybody has been chasing an MBA, for example, and there were many research done on, I'm being selective here, I'm just using some examples here, is that an MBA is not as valuable as it used to be in the past. I'm not saying an MBA is not valuable. Please don't quote me out of context. Yeah. I'm just saying that for the really advanced part of the world is that everybody's not going to university. That is the basic point I'm trying to make. A second very important point, if you look at the nature of economic activity today, things are very much skills driven and it's very much technology driven. And if you do not keep on changing and make sure that you stay, that you keep on polishing up on your skills, you're going to fall behind. And if you don't make use of the most recent technology, you're going to fall behind as well. So the point I try to make here is that people think that once you've got a degree, it's all over, done. Now I'm going to get a job and for the rest of my world. That is not the case. You have to continuously learn and make sure that you sharpen up on your skills. And that is something that I think we also lack in South Africa.
Dr. Matutu, your thoughts?
Let me come in there. I am talking about universities. The idea that there are universities which do not train in terms of the relevant technological developments is flawed. There are universities of technology that we have in our midst. They keep their students as much in the private sector, to a certain extent, as much within the public sector. There are universities which are training within the practical engineering qualifications and so on. And they are so developed that they are ahead of our market in terms of the skill set that is being produced, robotics and so on. And our economy has not managed to catch up with such. So the idea that when you talk about skills, you have to run out of universities is a little bit flawed. Secondly, I have to mention this. In that article, it is mentioned that universities are so badly run. Most of them are having qualifications when it comes to auditing and so on. Looking at the 2023 year, out of the 26 universities, 25 had unqualified audits. One had not submitted its report yet because of the disruptions which were there, and that will happen in June. So these are problematic because a third of the income of university is that stream income, which is coming from either the philanthropists, the private sector, international market, and they believe these things. So I do think that they need to be corrected.
Dawie, more than 100,000 matriculants couldn't be placed at South African public universities as the number of bachelor passes exceeded the space available. Of course, your primary thing here is skills development more than just universities at this point. Why don't we rather just fix the universities as opposed to throwing the baby out with the bathwater then?
Well, certainly the universities needs to be fixed. So without a doubt, the university needs to be fixed. And let me just keep on drumming on the same drum. And that is, but we really have to start where it really matters, and that is with primary education. And there South Africa is doing a horrible job. And our kids are paying the price for that. But you're absolutely right. Not only should universities be fixed, and I can just make this comment. A university is a very special institution. A university is run by very special people, highly qualified people, and there are highly qualified people working there. So a university should be very, very well run. And even if there's one single university with a qualified audit, it's just totally unacceptable. They must be institutions of excellence And I'm afraid, and the reality is that if you look at what's been happening on the way that universities have been run the last couple of years, there are many examples, and you guys report on it all the time about universities, some sort of issue about mismanagement and so on at universities. It's unheard of. I can't believe that if we hear something about this. I can kind of understand if you hear something about mismanagement of a company or even a state-owned enterprise, but the university is a special place run by very, very special people.
Yeah, let me give you the final word then, Dr. Petiwe Matutu. We kind of have to close, only have 30 seconds.
Not a problem with the accuracy of the information that is being provided by Dr. Roodt. He may be respected, but I have a serious problem. I've just explained to you that the 26th university is going to be submitting in June. He's talking about qualified audits. I do think that the business of South Africa, the people of South Africa, have to look at the facts. Just because someone has got a so-called a respected economist doesn't mean that he's an expert on higher education. He's talking about mismanagement of universities. He does not substantiate on what he's talking about. I've got a problem with that. Thank you very much.
Dr. Petiwe Matutu, thank you so much for the time this morning. Really appreciate it. Dawie Roodt as well. Thank you so much, economist there at Efficient Group, also unpacking for us just his thoughts on wanting to see the closure of perhaps a lot of universities, rather focusing on skills development, as he then says, saying the right kind of skills need to be put bare, but the University of South Africa pushing back and saying, well, this is the place in which most of South Africans get their way out as well.